Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Haunted Gaming. After Bead Dice Sky, we're looking at X-Men Apocalypse. What looks to be a traditional gaming creepypasta with X-Men, which is the first time I think we've done an X-Men creepypasta. Let's see what this one has in store for us. How can the X-Men be scary? An SNES game of all things? Well, you've seen it happen before, but let's see how it is in this creepypasta. Sit back, relax, and let's see X-Men Apocalypse. This is a recent experience I had with the Super Nintendo game, X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. For those who are unfamiliar with the game, it was a side-scrolling beat-em-up in which you could play as the X-Men, Gambit, Psylocke, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Beast. I had been a fan of this game ever since I'd gotten it for my 6th birthday the year it came out. I played it often, and got so good at it that I could beat the entire game using any one character. You're given a choice of character for every stage after the first set of stages. Unfortunately, like so many other gamers, I eventually fell victim to modernization as newer consoles were released. My older games and systems got worse over time, and were eventually retired to storage. I didn't try to find them and take them with me when I moved out of my parents' house. In fact, while visiting one day, I allowed my mom to throw my Super Nintendo out. She was cleaning, and asked if I really needed to keep it, and I said no, since I rarely played old video games anymore. I moved to residence at the university I was attending. I had a roommate, Gary, who loved retro video games and would let me play them often. He only had a few games, but it was still nice to play them. However, this made me want to play X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, not on an emulator, but on a console like the good old days. I looked for it at my parents' house once or twice, but it seemed like it was lost forever in the chaos of my mom's basement storage. Sadly, Gary had committed suicide one day. I was gone the weekend it happened, but some of his relatives were there picking up his belongings when I returned. They said they weren't sure what to do with most of his stuff. They asked me if I wanted to keep his old games and consoles, and I really wasn't sure how to respond. But they insisted I take them, since no one else in the family really played video games. They assured me that to them it was just another box that they'd have to carry downstairs. My yearnings for nostalgia had come back to me in spite of the depressing circumstances, and so I accepted. The next day I started to think about retro gaming again. It wasn't that I didn't care about Gary's death, I just didn't want to dwell on it. I now had a working Super Nintendo, so I knew I could play X-Men Mutant Apocalypse if I could just find it. I had my chance to look for it when the holiday break between school terms rolled around. I spent hours rummaging through every box my parents had, and I found an old box that I hadn't seen before, and so I asked my mom what was in it. She said it was old memorabilia from my late grandfather, whom I had barely known or tried getting to know. It seemed unlikely that any games would be in there, but I decided to look anyways. I opened the box and there was a huge collection of various things that were of little interest to me. Journals, pictures, odds and ends, certificates, but no games were immediately visible. Not yet giving up, I began rummaging through the collection. Tossing old books left and right, I accidentally cracked a framed picture of my grandma and grandpa. But I thought nothing of it, and hoped no one would notice. As I came to the bottom of the box, I found X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, not in the box itself, but wedged in the outside of the bottom of the box, so that I may have found it quicker by simply inspecting the box first. Thinking nothing of it, I chucked and put the other stuff away, happy to have found my favorite childhood game. I brought the game back to residence with me after the break was over and immediately put it into my newly acquired fully functional Super Nintendo and turned the power on. The game wouldn't start at first, which of course is normal with older games, so I cleaned the cartridge with a Q-tip and tried again. This time I got a low buzzing sound from the TV, but still no actual game. I tried a third time and finally saw the Capcom logo flashing, which was a good sign, I thought. However, the relief was short-lived. The normal intro started playing, showing the blue planet Earth and expository text as usual, but then the colors inverted and the game froze. So I was forced to shut it off yet again. I tried a fourth time. The intro ran fine now, including the demo play which normally followed the exposition. I pushed start to be taken to the title screen. I got super excited when I heard the first few strains of the title screen music, but this excitement quickly turned to confusion as the music seemed to wind down before stopping. Kind of like an old music box when it quits. The rest of the title screen seemed fine, except the title itself read X-Men Apocalypse instead of X-Men Mutant Apocalypse. I wasn't sure why this would be the case. I wondered if maybe the title had been different on this screen, or maybe some versions were just different like this. I selected Mission Mode, and it seemed that the game was underway. Professor X gave the mission introduction like normal, and the music seemed to be fine now. But the character select screen, it seemed different. The colors just seemed a little off to me. Undaunted, I chose Gambit, as I liked his stage the least and wanted to get it over with. Oddly, the screen jumped and the sound cut out when I made my decision. The screen then faded back in, but not to Gambit's stage. Instead, I was looking at the intro to the level after the first set of stages. The Brood. When I got to the character selection screen, Gambit was dead, which was indicated, like normal, by his character card being gray and his life count being 0. I had no idea how this happened, but decided to press on anyways. I chose Wolverine for this level, and again, the screen seemed to glitch. But this time, random sound clips from the game played briefly. I then saw the intro for the next level, Tusk. Just like the last time, the character I had selected was now dead, and my next selection brought me to the intro to Apocalypse's stage. I had given up on actually trying to play the game at this point, so out of frustration I just began selecting characters until only Psylocke was left. I selected her and saw a brief flash of Professor X's face as the screen glitched, only I thought his eyes were red and he had a toothy grin. With no characters left, I was taken to the intro for the second last stage, Juggernaut. Professor X was nowhere to be seen in this intro, and there was no music, just the normal text. Then I saw the character selection screen again, with the music back on. Although now at a slow pace, and with off-key notes. Now all the playable X-Men were dead, and it surprised me that I had gotten a game over screen, and was free to look at all the dead character cards. The music started to wind down and then stop, just like the title screen music had. And then Professor X's face came up on the screen, the same face I thought I saw in the brief flash after picking my last X-Man. With the red eyes and toothy grin, only now his face wasn't turned to the side, he was looking straight at me. Text began to appear under him. It read, "You watched them die. You let them die. But look how far you've come. Why aren't you happy?" Then I heard a terrible deep laugh, and then I saw what looked like Jean Grey struggling behind a cell door. I was shocked. Having never heard of anything like this in the game before, she stopped struggling and looked at me, tears streaming down her face. The screen went black, and I heard a woman sobbing. Then more text appeared, which read, "Too bad about the fire and torment they're about to face. But look how far you've come." I didn't know what to do or think at this point. I just looked on, feeling nervous and afraid. Then one more line of text appeared, which said, "Maybe it's you who should be sacrificed." Then the game stopped working. I never did get that cartridge to working, and nor did I want to. I couldn't help but feel disturbed by what I had seen, and the message the game had given me. It made me think about loved ones and sacrifice, and how callous and opportunistic I had been after the deaths of my grandfather and roommate. I wondered if maybe my traumatizing experience was due to the disrespect for the dead I had shown in my selfish desire to play a simple video game. Or maybe I had become involved in some kind of curse that had affected one or both of them. I never did get an answer, but that ruined game haunts my dreams to this day. Just in case my thoughtlessness somehow made that event happen, I now always make sure to visit the graves of my loved ones at least occasionally, as well as to respect their belongings and memory. That was barely edging the fine sword of haunted gaming and a shitpost episode, ladies and gents, let me tell you that very much. And I wanted to do this definitely after Beat Dice Sky in the schedule. Now, it is a traditional gaming creepypasta with weird game consoles and whatnot. It is. But what separates it is the fact that it doesn't jump the shark and provide us with complete hilarity as shitpastas will do. Shitpastas, on the other hand, they degrade far worse, okay? I mean, if I can read something like Burn Baby Burn, I'm not going to toss this one yet into that pile. Now, here, it attempts... it attempts not to jump that shark, we get it. And it succeeds by keeping those, fairly common elements alive, and it has a bare skeleton of cohesiveness. But it ultimately never leads up to much. We get a half-assed moral towards the end with some vague hint of a sequel, possible vague hint of some sequel with some curse or, I think, possession, really, of the game console and beyond. We get told that the friend kills themselves abruptly. Look, if you're going to use suicide, please use it properly and build up and treat it respectfully of all things. It's not right if you don't. And even then, if you're going to use suicide, at least make it add up to something. Play it, because this never added to anything. We meet a character a few lines ago, literally a few lines ago, and they're already killing themselves. I mean, okay, sure, what are we paying creepypasta characters billing or something? Or is it going to jump out of something if they find out that it's not good? I mean, what's going on here? It's literature. I mean, we didn't have to just jump to suicide of all things. And if we were, we should have built up this character at least somewhat. We should have built up a meaningful relationship. And moving on further than that, we have the search for the game, and then the actual creepy game act, which was very little, by the way. It played out like a weak Action Man creepypasta clone rather than standing out on its own. Look, this is where creepypastas like Ben Majora's Mask do it well. And not only do they have a great video game creepy feel to it, I mean, as far as providing video and gameplay, the literature part of it works too. Like when you're reading it through, you're visualizing it. That works. But it also has a really great, outside world of its own, a world where you're looking at Jad Sable not just as some video game protagonist, but as a character. And over here, you should do the same as well. You should implement characters properly. You should, instead of making them go and commit suicide instantly, you should actually introduce them. You should look more into them before they decide to go off themselves. That would have given a bigger impact. Heck, you might as well have, gotten both of those two to play the Mega Man game together, if anything. And to get to this moral at the end, which, you could have done far better than that. You had to implement the suicide and then the breaking of that picture for the grandma and grandpa just to add to some effect that wasn't really great all on its own. Now, moving on here, this is a great example of how to skeleton your creepypasta, since again, it has the elements. It has a good framework. All it needed was more time to build up. It needed more of a story. It needed a better outside world, and it needed an actual creepy game, if anything. It's one thing to say that X-Men is scary and whatnot. The game isn't playing the way it's supposed to. Look, in that part of the creepypasta, it's done fine. It's not showing you some crazy, gore and whatnot. I mean, sure, the dialogue at the end was a little cringeworthy, and the showcase of the professor was a little weird, I might say. It was very on the cringe side. So if that was done better, yeah, sure, it would be far better than what I was, it'd be far better than what it is now. But it didn't do that, and if you're gonna, give us a gaming creepypasta, focus on the game a little bit. Take some notes from the Metroid 2 Lost Worlds creepypasta that we did. That not only had media, but that really put the game into it. So if you're gonna put a creepypasta on that, make sure you're actually doing a creepypasta on the game and focusing on it to the degree that it really deserves. And that's really all I can say about it. It had, I guess, a nice moral at the end. Sure, that was a great moral, but it wasn't really the ending you should have picked. And it could have been far stronger if more time and build-up was put into it. Something with more substance, really. And that was another episode of Haunted Gaming. And if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. Tell me what you thought about this creepypasta in the comments below, and what would you rate it, and how would you change to make it better? This is me, Mutahar, and I'm out.